Hi guys, so it is book haul time. This is my new and review book haul for April, where I show you all the books I've bought new or been sent for review by publishers, which is quite a few. So get yourself comfortable because I think this one could be a long one. Before we get into the books though, I would like to thank the sponsor of today's video, who are Shoptagr. So Shoptagr is an ingenious little invention. It's a browser add-on that you can download and save things that you're looking to buy, for example books, online too, and be alerted when they go on sale or are discounted, and even find coupons for the sites that you're purchasing from. So for me, I have a few Shoptagr wish lists, including physical books, ebooks, and now board games, because there's so many that I'm interested in. And those wish lists mean I can keep all the things I'm interested in together, regardless of where I'm saving them, whether it's like on Wordery or Waterstones or Blackwell's. They're all in one place, and I can sign up to be alerted to when they're discounted, whether it be any discount or I want to wait until they're like full 50% off, and I'll get a little email in my inbox, which is brilliant. And I've definitely had some success in the past with hearing about books being discounted, because sometimes I often find as well book discounts are quite short-lived, so you want to like grab them when you can, and you can't just keep checking the website. But just to make things even better, when you go to the checkout of a website, whether you're buying yourself one book or a little bundle of books, Shoptagr will then scan the internet and see if there is any coupon codes for that website for you, which is amazing. And I've had so many nice little surprises come checkout time from Shoptagr alerts finding me coupons for that website, even if it's just like 5 or 10%. Every little helps. So if that sounds good to you, and I can't see why it wouldn't, do click the link in the description box down below, and thanks again to Shoptagr for sponsoring this video. And the first book I actually have to show you, I managed to grab for a bit of a steal of about £3.50 when it went on reduction online, and it'd been on my wish list for such a long time, and I'd sort of toyed with picking up now and then but never gotten around to it, and that felt like the sign it was time. And that is Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. This is a middle grade book which actually has some lovely black and white illustrations inside it. It's just like a gorgeously designed book. It's published by HarperCollins and the art is by John Classen. But this is set in a Britain that faces impending war, but we follow a young boy and his best friend who's a fox that he rescued as a cub, and their sort of just situation in this much like wider dangerous time. And it sounds so beautiful. I've heard wonderful things about the writing and the storyline. I think it's going to be quite emotional, but like really atmospheric, and I'm just really looking forward to it now that I've finally got a copy. We then have 3 books that you may already have seen that I hauled, because I hauled them in my Femme Fantail reading vlog. I picked them all up in a bit of a splurge in Forbidden Planet, which is one of my favourite like speculative science fiction fantasy bookshops. And the first one is A Orc on the Wild Side by Tom Holt. Now this is actually about the king of the goblins, and he is basically trying to like reform goblin society. He's looking for ways to change things up. He's enacted a new constitution that takes inspiration from other like creatures in the magical realm, as well as the humans that are starting to move into the magical realm. The book opens with this hilarious like scene of basically house hunters looking for cheap real estate because London's got too pricey, and they're going to like Middle Earth, for example, and Hobbiton to find new houses that they can renovate at inexpensive prices. That's just Tom Holt's sense of humour, and I always really very much enjoy it. But King Mordak is not meeting with 100% enthusiasm from the rest of the goblins for his reforms, and he's really having to like push back and make them happen, like new roads and healthcare systems, because it's not what they want, because they're kind of into war and death and just hysteria in general. So it's kind of his battle in changing his society and the best way to do it. And it is of course a comedy. That's what Tom Holt specialises in, comedy fantasy, and I always really enjoy his writing. It makes me laugh out loud, so was really pleased to finally pick up a copy of this one. We then have 2 fantasy novels written by women. The first one is Rose Daughter by Robin McKinley. So this is one of 2 Beauty and the Beast retellings written by Robin McKinley. Her other retelling is called Beauty, and I've already read that one. I really enjoyed it, and I'm so interested in reading another Beauty and the Beast retelling written by the same author, and what she changed and decided to emphasise or hone in on in this retelling that she didn't in Beauty. I think it's just going to be so interesting for comparison. But I also just find Robin McKinley's fantasy worlds so beautiful. In atmosphere they're quite soft and quiet, and I really enjoy that. I think she does that really well, and she has just a beautiful way with words, so she always manages to paint quite vivid, magical worlds, but in this kind of ethereal way. I don't really know how to explain it other than that, so I'm really excited to read this, enjoy it, and also compare it to Beauty. But then lastly, for that little splurge, I have The Empress of Salt and Fortune, which is one of the Tor novella series. So Tor, who publish a lot of science fiction and fantasy, have this novella series, which means they're like short books. This one's less than 100 pages that vary very widely throughout those genres, but I found some of my favourite authors and books through that series. I think it's such a great way to be introduced to an author's work, and they do have quite a lot in that catalogue that were by debut authors at the time, so it's sort of like a good start for science fiction and fantasy authors. And this is one I hadn't heard of before. I think it's new out, but it's set in a fantastical version of historical imperial China, and we follow a royal woman who is sent to marry the emperor but develops a relationship with one of the servant women. And I've mentioned this before, but there's just a sentence on the back which completely sold me that says, "At once feminist high fantasy and an indictment of the monarchy. This evocative debut follows the rise of Empress Inyo, who has few resources and fewer friends." So this is all about her struggle to survive, and like I mentioned, I think there is a bit of queer romance in this. From when I looked it up on Goodreads, it's not entirely clear from the blurb, but that's the sense I'm getting, so I am really looking forward to this, and it's one I'm probably going to zoom through. We then move on to the books that I have been sent by the publishers for review, and the first one's one I've already started, and that is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, winner of the 2019 Booker Prize, currently longlisted for the 2020 Women's Prize for Fiction, a book that's getting a lot of praise basically, and that I have essentially heard no bad things about. I've actually wanted to read Bernardine Evaristo for years. She's got a book called Emperor's Babe, which is set during the Roman Empire, that I have on my bookcase, and of course I am interested in reading that because it's set in antiquity. But when the publisher offered me a copy of the new paperback release of this book, I had to have one given all the praise I've heard for it, and I've, like I mentioned, already started. It follows the lives of 12 different women, some of whom are connected to one another, and is told in like sections of women who are connected to one another, so like 3 women who know each other, then 3 women that know each other, I think. So I've only read the first section, the first 3 women, but what I have read was stunning, just like so well written, so interesting, such like complex characters who are of different ages and different backgrounds and therefore have different experiences, and you learn in the first half at least about like London, both like in the 70s and the 80s, but like a young person going to university in London now. And I've just been really enjoying reading about these women and their connections, and I can see why it's been so like highly lauded, and I'm excited to like continue on with it. We then have a middle grade that I was so excited for and still am, but I'm so pleased to have a copy, and that's Nicola Skinner's Storm. So you may recall Nicola Skinner's other book, Bloom, her debut middle grade, was one of my favourite books of 2019. I thought it was absolutely brilliant, definitely one of my favourite middle grade books in general, and I'm just so excited to have more by this author and see what she does next. This is another standalone like Bloom, and I really do enjoy having standalones on my bookcase to check out. Plus they very much continued on with the gorgeous like book design with this one that they had in Bloom. Like, look at that. This is just true art and I'm so excited to have it on my bookcase. This one is about Frances, whose parents were not prepared for her birth. They had an easel and some paint, but not anything useful like a car or a phone. So it's no wonder she's always had a temper. She was born on a beach in a storm. What Frances herself was not prepared for was accidentally dying in a freak natural disaster that wiped out her whole town. Waking up 100 years later, stuck in her house, Frances finds a whole load of new things to be angry about, and that's even before the tourists turn up. But in her new existence as a poltergeist, Frances is about to discover that behaving badly might just be a force for unimaginable good. So Bloom very much touched on sort of like climate change and green spaces and just sort of like the changing landscape of the modern world, and had therefore like a bit of like a political undertone, and I feel like this one may do the same, but I'm excited to see what that is, and I'm sure this one's going to be as engaging as the last one. Then a book you may have also seen in my Femme Fantail vlog, because I was sent it in the post and I was so excited I couldn't wait to talk about it, and that is The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. This is one, it has a blurb, it has lots of things going for it, but also has lesbian orcs, and that's kind of it for me. Like, I don't need to know the plot of this book because it has lesbian orcs, and that's all I want in life. I feel like I didn't know I wanted this book, and then as soon as I knew this was a book, it was immediately the only book I wanted because that sounds brilliant. I do believe it's like about like an orc priestess who like is part of a ritual that tells her when she's going to die, and obviously it's partially her reaction to that and lots more like political, fantastical, world building and intrigue, but again, lesbian orcs. That's kind of all I have to say, and I'm so excited about this book. I follow the author on Twitter and have been like following her talking about it, and I just have been like building up more and more and more excitement for it because of that, and I now have it. I have a physical copy in my house thanks to Pan Macmillan, so yes, cannot wait for this one. We then have a book that I was not expecting to arrive in the post, but I am very interested in, and it's Reconciliations of My Non-Existence by Rebecca Solnit. So I've only read one of Rebecca Solnit's book in the past, which is Hope in the Time of Dark, I think it's called, but she has quite a few quite well-known essay collections out there, and she has like really interesting things to say, and I've sort of read other things that she's said elsewhere online, particularly around feminism and activism. And this one's actually quite personal. This is about Rebecca Solnit's sort of journey as a writer and as a young woman. So it says in 1981, a 19-year-old woman named Rebecca Solnit rented a studio apartment in San Francisco that would be her home for the next 25 years and where she would transform into a writer and activist who speaks for the marginalised. There she encountered an epidemic of violence against women and their exclusion from cultural arenas by a society that preferred women to shut up or go away. 4 decades on, she describes how over time she broke through oppression and found her voice, liberated by West Coast activism, growing gay pride and punk rock, as well as the world of literature and books. So I think it'll be really interesting to hear about her personal journey. Plus, I recently finished reading a book by Joanna Russ from the 80s called How to Suppress Women's Writing, which is obviously very much on that topic of like women being excluded from like cultural arenas as it's described here and not being treated as seriously as male writers. And this kind of sounds like a personal experience that would sit very well in tandem with that book. Then we have Night Spinner by A.D. Thorley, and this one is actually loosely a retelling of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is not something I've ever read a retelling of before. It says The Hunchback of Notre Dame reimagined as a tundra-inspired epic fantasy. So we follow Ennebish, who has been ostracised from society, sent to live in a monastery because her magical powers because something happened involving her magical powers that led to like an awful catastrophe that I think lots of lives were lost in, and before then she'd sort of been highly revered for her power until it sort of turned bad, obviously. But she's now been enlisted by the kingdom to help hunt down a criminal who it turns out is actually a bit of a Robin Hood figure. This criminal is stealing things from the capital but to help starving people who have been affected by war and have been sort of ignored by the ruling elite. So that obviously becomes like a moral quandary for her because she was sent to catch this criminal who is actually doing more sort of moral justice than the people who are her rulers, and that is just like a concept I'm always interested in reading about. And like I said, those sort of like Hunchback of Notre Dame vibes sound really interesting to me because I haven't read a retelling of that before. We then have a non-fiction book that isn't out till May, and I've been sent an early review copy, which is very exciting because it is Thebes, the Forgotten City of Ancient Greece by Paul Cartledge. There's something so exciting to me about like getting sent a review copy of a Paul Cartledge book because Paul Cartledge is one of like the first sort of historians you are introduced to at university, I found, at least in the study of ancient history, because he's just written so many pivotal yet accessible history books. For example, his book on Sparta is definitely one of his most famous. He's written on Alexander. I've got an excellent book by him that's just all about democracy in general, which was an ancient Greek invention. And now he has this book on Thebes, which honestly isn't an area of Greece that I'm as familiar with as, say, Athens, which is my like area of expertise. So it'll be really nice to just sort of read like an accessible guide to Thebes by an author that I really trust. I've gone to see him speak before as well, and he's just brilliant, such an engaging historian, and I like really look up to him. So I'm really pleased to have this one on my shelf. And even the back here says, the birthplace of Hercules, the home of the Sphinx whose riddle Oedipus solved, one of the most powerful cities in ancient Greece, but Thebes has largely been forgotten, overshadowed by its better known rivals Athens and Sparta, which I think is incredibly fair to say, and I myself need a little bit more education, so excited to read this one. We then have a book I was sent called Our Bodies, Their Battlefield, What War Does to Women. So this is specifically about women in wartime, which is actually something I've read quite a bit on in terms of ancient warfare, but it's just like a topic I would like to be better educated on in general. Christina Lamb has actually been a war reporter for over 30 years. She was the co-author of I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai. She contributed to the writing of that book, which I think is incredible in itself. And I mean, the subtitle of this book gives it away. It is about women in conflict zones and the specific dangers faced by them, and maybe like voices that have been ignored and sort of overlooked for decades, centuries, even millennia, as the study of antiquity will show you. So another one that just sounds incredibly important, and I'm pleased to have on my bookcase. And then we have a collection of essays called Blueberries by Elena Savage. The subtitle is Essays Concerning Understanding. Scribe offered to send me a review copy of this, and I just thought the blurb sounded so captivating that I had to say yes, so I'm just going to read that to you. The body frequently escapes her, but is always very much present in these compellingly vivid, clear-eyed essays on an embodied self in flight through the world, from the brilliant young writer Elena Savage. In Portuguese police stations and Portland college campuses, in suburban Melbourne libraries and wintry Berlin apartments, Savage shows bodies in pain and in love, bodies at work and at rest. She circles back to scenes of crimes or near crimes, to lovers or near lovers, to turn over the stones, reread the paperwork, check the deeds, approach from another angle altogether. These essays traverse cities and space, bodies and histories, moving through forms and modes to find a closer kind of truth. Blueberries is ripe with acid, promise and sweetness. I think there is something very like human and connecting about reading personal essays, so I would really like to try more of them, and this one in particular sounded really interesting and the themes really stood out to me. But before I go, I do have one last thing to share with you, because that is a subscription box. I was sent the March Fairy Loot box to unbox for you, and I wanted to include it in this haul because I am so excited about this. I got my first ever Fairy Loot box in February, and it has to be one of my favourite literary subscription box services for sure. The stuff inside these is brilliant if you're into sort of fantasy books, which as you know I am. So I'm going to show you what is in this month's box. We have a mug, which I can already see is by a book I've read, which is brilliant. It's always kind of nice to get, you know, nerdy memorabilia for stuff that you've read and loved, because I loved Serpent and Dove. So let's have a closer look at what this one looks like. Oh, this is a nice shaped mug like that. You know these ones that just have the slightly like turned lip at the top? I mean, mug design is important. It changes how you drink your coffee and tea, in my opinion. So we have here the two central characters, or love interests, from Serpent and Dove, which is a brilliant fantasy book, by the way. It's sort of set in like a faux historical France. It's very, very much a romance as much as it is a fantasy novel. It's also about like the way women are treated by society and witch hunts, and I just really, really enjoyed it overall as a book. So I'm quite pleased to have a Serpent and Dove mug in my cupboard. Oh, there's even a little Serpent and Dove inside. Love that. We then have something fabric here, which is all gold and black. Oh, it's a scarf. That's adorable. This has just got loads of little cats sitting on piles of books, which I'm here for. I love me a cat. So yeah, that's pretty flash. We then have, oh, this is a luggage tag. Okay. One does not simply walk into Mordor. That's brilliant. Obviously a reference to Lord of the Rings. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I might give this to my friend who is like a die-hard Lord of the Rings fan, Jill, and loves to travel, so yeah, I might pass this on to her, because to be honest, I just feel like she deserves all the Lord of the Rings memorabilia. She's just such a die-hard fan. We then, I think, with all the boxes, get lots of lovely prints, which I love. I kind of love this kind of like fantasy fan art. I like follow a lot of sort of fantasy fan art accounts on Instagram, and it also has a little description of what's inside the box on the back of this one. And this one's actually about the book that's inside here, so I won't read this until I find out what that is. And then lastly, oh, before we get to the book, is a lip balm. Brilliant. Can never have too many lip balms. This one is flavoured like strawberry prosecco. Oh my goodness, that smells incredible. Okay, I'm very much here for this. It says Malachi's on it. I don't know, that sounds like a fantasy series I haven't read, so let me just double check here. It's a bookish lip balm inspired by the book Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, which I haven't read, but let me know if you think I should. We then, like I mentioned, have a book, as always. I mean, it is a literary subscription box, and this is just exciting because you sort of get like a new release fantasy book, which is one of my favourite things to unbox. Okay, this is The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller, which I haven't heard of before. It says, my lovers all feel the need to give me nice things, very expensive things. It's been a fun game, learning their secrets, seducing them, getting them to shower me with gifts. But to be honest, I'm bored with it. I have a new game in mind. I'm going to woo the king. I suspect it won't be longer than a month before he's helplessly in love with me, and when he proposes, I will say yes for the first time. For once the marriage is official and consummated, I'll kill the Shadow King and take his kingdom for myself. That sounds incredible. I love it. I love that concept that at least at the beginning the protagonist has sort of nefarious motives and isn't exactly like a good guy, so brilliant. I'm up for reading a book about someone who wants to marry and then assassinate the king, as I'm assuming things will not go quite to plan or be as simple as they seem at first. But that is what is inside the March Fairy Loot box. Again, love this subscription service, even if it just like sends me some of the coolest fantasy new releases. Thank you again to Shoptagr for sponsoring this video. It is incredibly helpful in supporting this channel and everything I create online. So yes, please do check out the link down below, and until next time, happy reading. I will see you all again soon. Bye guys.